Welcome, everyone, to Cannabis News with Joe Klare. It's April 13th, 2018, presented by the Marijuana Times. We're only 1 week away from 420. That's right. I hope you have your plans ready because time is running out. A week. You have a week until 420. If you haven't started planning now, well, you better think of something quick. The clock is running, is ticking, as they say. Got a lot of stuff going on today. Make sure you go check out marijuanatimes.org for every episode of this show, plus a bunch of great articles about the cannabis news, about the cannabis community, industry, and beyond, all the news and opinion you need. marijuanatimes.org. We got stories today about so-called synthetic cannabis, which is a phrase that I'm not fond of, but everybody uses it. So we all stay on the same page of what we're talking about, the stuff you need to avoid. Also, new numbers out of California. Somebody's put together a database of all the places that allow legal marijuana sales or any kind of distribution or any of that, whether it's medical or recreational in California. Spoiler alert, there's a lot of places in California you can't buy legal marijuana for any reason. Also, Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado apparently has struck a deal with President Trump to get the feds off the backs of state legal marijuana businesses, and in exchange, Gardner is going to lift his blockade of Department of Justice official nominees. Talk about all of that coming up, of course, but first, Cannabis News brought to you by NatureSideCannabis.com. Check them out, NatureSideCannabis.com. Side is spelled CIDE. They have organic, all-natural pesticides and pest control. If you want to be regulatory compliant, if you want to grow safe and poison-free, you need to check out NatureSideCannabis.com. They're a proud sponsor of Cannabis News. Like I said, check out their expertise. Regulations are important. If you're in a state that has legal cannabis growing and you have pest problems, obviously, you want to pass regulations. Organic, all-natural pesticides from NatureSideCannabis.com. First story is from MarijuanaTimes.org by Jason Sander. Dangerous synthetic cannabis products cause an increase in ER visits. We covered this, I believe, last week. I'm not sure. You have to check a past episode. But the numbers as far as people having problems with this has gone up quite a bit. Now, 107 cases of people with severe bleeding after using this synthetic marijuana. There's been reports that rat poison has been found in a lot of these batches. Dr. Michelle Lepra of HSHS St. John's Hospital. So we see a lot of acute psychosis, a lot of psychiatric issues from the K2, a lot of agitation and physical problems or traumatic problems that occur from that. Also things like renal failure, kidney failure, and this with the bleeding are the biggest issues. As Jason points out in his first paragraph about cannabis prohibition makes people look elsewhere. That's how it restricts supply and raises prices. That's how, prohibition affects the what it's banning. And it causes people for, whatever reason, work drug tests, whatever, to find something that they can pass a drug test with and still get the effects of cannabis. The problem with synthetic cannabis, quote unquote, is that this is not the effect of cannabis. Renal failure, kidney failure, and bleeding. And people have been bleeding from every orifice by smoking this stuff. And it has not the effect of natural grown cannabis at all. But again, people say synthetic cannabis, fake weed, whatever. I think a lot of that leads to people looking at this as some sort of alternative to natural marijuana that's going to show up on a drug test. But, that's like saying, walking down the street and getting hit by a bus is an alternative from just standing on the sidewalk and not getting hit by a bus. There's a bit of a gap. They're not really comparable. And people are paying the price. That's nuts. Nuts. If anyone says, do you want to try some synthetic marijuana or some synthetic cannabis or fake weed or K2 or spice or potpourri or whatever it is? No, 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 no. No. Get out of here with that ish, as the kids say. That's right, I'm hip. I know what's going on. But seriously, That's these people. These people. 3 people have died. They're bleeding to death. And even if, there's not rat poison in the batch that you smoke, you still got a lot of problems. Of course, if there is rat poison, then there is the added problem of the rat poison. Just stay away. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. Stay away from so-called synthetic cannabis, K2 spice, all that stuff. The Californian.com is where this next story comes from. Database of marijuana rules from every city and county in California shows slow acceptance of Proposition 64. Fewer than 1 in 3 California cities allow any kind of cannabis business to operate in their borders, and just 18 of the state's 58 counties permit cannabis businesses in unincorporated areas. Now listen to this. Fewer than 1 in 5 California cities welcome medical marijuana dispensaries. Medical marijuana has been allowed in California since 1996. That's when it passed in 1996. And now there's a bunch of places in California that there's no, because of the regulations that just went into effect a couple years ago, there's not a lot of places where you can get medical cannabis. Fewer than 1 in 7 allow recreational cannabis stores, which sales to those 21 and older became legal on January 1st. Here's a chart from the Californian. You see there the breakdown between medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, and each is broken down between cities and counties. And you look there, and both graphs only go to 30%. None of these numbers, whether it's city or counties that allow medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, none of these go over 30%. The closest is almost 30% on that bar right there, with at least one type of business as far as medical marijuana in cities. That's that gets to almost 30%. That's the 144 out of 482, 1 in 3 California cities. That's as good as it gets. Most of these numbers are below 25% when it comes to either medical or recreational marijuana. Now, a lot of that can be, you can see that when it comes to recreational marijuana. Sales of recreational marijuana is very new. There is a lot to get through. A lot of local regulations have to be created. But the medical marijuana regulations, they're a little bit older. And most cities in California, you can't go to a medical marijuana dispensary. They're probably surprised a lot of people who think they know about what's going on in California. That's a problem. It's a serious problem. This story, by the way, and the full database, they're going to keep up to date on this database at the Californian, is a study conducted by the Southern California News Group and other digital-first newspapers. They're tracking and compiling the cannabis ordinances in all 540 city and county jurisdictions in California. And right now, as we've pointed out many times on the show, California's a patchwork of legality for both recreational and medical cannabis. Just most places, you cannot find a dispensary or a recreational shop in California. Hopefully that changes in the coming months. I was going to say, or the coming years, but let's face it, the coming months. This is it. The time is now, as they say. Now, it's a cliched saying, but as I'm fond of saying, cliched sayings are cliched sayings for a reason. California is supposed to be this bastion of marijuana freedom, and things are going really slow out of the gate. A long way to go. Still a lot of licenses to give out. Still a lot of local cities and unincorporated counties, or counties that are looking over their unincorporated areas, still have a lot of decisions to make. But I think as time goes on and more of them see, the tax revenue and the economic activity that these things create, more and more will jump on the bandwagon and allow at least medical marijuana dispensaries, if not medical and recreational dispensaries. This last story is from CNBC.com. Trump strikes a deal with Colorado Senator on legalized marijuana. President Donald Trump promised Republican Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado he would support efforts to protect states that have legalized marijuana, ending a standoff on Department of Justice nominations. Since the campaign, President Trump has consistently supported states' rights to decide for themselves how best to approach marijuana, Gardner said in a statement late Wednesday. I received a commitment from the president that the Department of Justice's rescission of the Cole memo will not impact Colorado's legal marijuana industry. Because of these commitments, I have informed the administration that I will be lifting my remaining holds on the Department of Justice nominees. Angry that Sessions had reneged on his pledge to leave marijuana states alone with the rescission of the Cole Amendment, Gardner promised to block all DOJ nominations pending a resolution. Since then, he has held up about 20 justice nominations, the Washington Post reported. White House Legislative Affairs Director Mark Short told the Washington Post, quote, "Clearly we've expressed our frustration with the delay with a lot of our nominees and feel that too often senators hijack a nominee for a policy solution. So we're reluctant to reward that sort of behavior, but at the same time, we're anxious to get our team at the Department of Justice." So in other words, Christopher Ingram from the Washington Post pointed out on Twitter that this is, just a verbal promise from Trump, and, take that for what it's worth. Tom Angel from Forbes responded that one of the reasons people in the community are making a big deal about it is to get the news out there. The more people that know that this is what Trump said, theoretically, the more blowback that could come to him if he reneges on his promise. We'll see how that goes. And I guess, of course, Gardner can always go back to stopping Department of Justice nominees. But I guess it looks on the surface like Trump caved, but it's not really a big cave. He said during the campaign that states should decide, and he was all for medical marijuana. Just leave it alone. And tell Jeff Sessions to leave it alone. Now, apparently Trump doesn't talk to Jeff Sessions. Whenever he's mad at Jeff Sessions, he tweets it. So I guess he doesn't have Sessions' number. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is there. But if you need to tweet it, then tweet it. Get on Twitter, at Jeff Sessions. Well, he doesn't even add him. He just says his name, Attorney General Sessions. Say, Attorney General Sessions, I don't have your phone number, so I'm tweeting you. Lay off of marijuana of any kind. Let states decide for themselves. Just leave it alone. That's all we can hope for from the Trump administration. And hopefully, maybe if something goes through Congress, maybe he will be supportive of it. Maybe something protecting states from federal interference. Maybe he would even sign something like that if it got to his desk, but that's a long way, of course. So we'll see how it all shakes out. The bottom line is that at least the promise from Trump has come and has broken the stalemate when it comes to Gardner's judicial blockade. That is going to do it for us. The end of the week, as I said, 1 week away from 420. That's nuts. We'll be here, of course, next week. 5 shows every week. Cannabis news with Joe Klare. It's April 13th, 2018. Continue liking, sharing, commenting on the videos on YouTube or Facebook or marijuanatimes.org. The audio podcast, of course, can be found on Apple Podcasts. Thanks, everybody, for checking us out. Thanks to naturesideCannabis.com for being a proud sponsor. Check out their organic, all-natural pesticides, naturesideCannabis.com. Thanks, everybody. The weekend has officially started. We'll see you next week on Cannabis News